Welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtable's Cinematographers. I'm Carolyn Jardina, and I'm with my colleague Greg Kilday. Yeah. I'd like to welcome Bradford Young, John Toll, Charlotta Bruus Christensen, Caleb Deschanel, Rodrigo Prieto, and Linus Sandgren.
Let's start out with a very general question. What's the biggest misunderstanding that you find people have about what you do as cinematographers?
Oof.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, I think that it's a lot of people, at least when I was even, especially starting, and people in my family even thought that I took photos, that I was a photographer, which in a way we are, we just take 24 frames per second. Sometimes more, right?
Sometimes. Sometimes 120.
But yeah, that was kind of the main thing. I mean, my father-in-law always thought that I was like, that I had a little studio and took like fast-forward photos and things like that, so that's one of the misunderstandings.
I wonder, when you read reviews, how often do you feel the reviewers get it right when they talk about the look of a movie?
Some of the time. I mean, a lot of the reviewers are pretty knowledgeable, I think. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they just kind of misinterpret what we do. Mm-hmm. Or they don't realize everything we do, because there's a lot to the job more than just being a photographer. Mm-hmm. Incredible organizational skills. You're a manager, you're an organizer, and that's all part of the job. That's what actually helps you.
And of course, if someone's not on a set, they'll never know exactly what the cinematographer's contribution is vis-a-vis the director's.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's part of the situation as well, is that, when you work with different directors, your relationship with them always changes depending upon what their forte or what their interest happens to be. I mean, sometimes you work with directors who really don't care about what the film looks like so much, and others are much more, attuned to visual imagery, and, so you sort of adjust yourself depending upon, what the director is really interested in. And I find that to be really fun, because, then you really get to learn things from them, and they get to learn things from you, and it's exciting.
I mean, when you're working with a director for the first time, what kind of conversations do you have? How do you know you're both speaking the same language? And maybe talk about some of the first-time directors you've worked with.
I like to listen a lot to the director to start with, like to hear him out, what his vision is. And that usually builds, images and ideas in your head. So hopefully the first meeting is extended from 1 hour to 2 hours or something, spitballing ideas.
This, for La La Land, it was your first time working with Damien. So what was that like?
Oh, that was, we met, with Damien, we met at his office, and he played me in the music. That was a musical, so he played me in the music, which was, to me, very emotional. I was surprised how I reacted to it, actually. But Damien also has a lot of, he's got a very strong vision. He's a director who also wrote the story, so he obviously, sometimes you work with directors that adapt the story, but in this case, he wrote the story, so it was very personal to him. And he was sort of like a volcano in how, how he talked about the film and how he saw it. So it was very easy for me to get inspired by him. He's a man that very easily inspires you, And I think that is, to me, that's the best, when you work with directors that, have a strong vision and who wants to really inspire the crew to take on to do that, that film.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that you really want to go in and meet a director and have him draw you into their excitement and enthusiasm for the project they're doing. And that's the best part, is when you are just enthused about it because of their incredible enthusiasm and excitement. And you need to have that, because to make a movie, you have to have an incredible drive and enthusiasm for something, and you can't let it wane. And no matter how many problems you have along the way, you just have to keep that going. And it's really wonderful when you work with a director like that.
Mm-hmm. Are you able to do test shoots before you actually start production, or does that happen very often?
Mm. Yeah, but also I just wanted to add that sometimes that conversation also starts one step ahead of the story, where it's just about, do we actually get along with each other? Like, how do you read a story, and how do you read a script, and what is this bigger feeling about, and do we do we connect in terms of understanding a visual language? And then, so it becomes about that respect of, well, you're going to bring something and I'm going to bring something. And then the whole part of listening. But sometimes that just of meeting a person and it becomes about an understanding of a story. And then it digs into the story where you then use those tools that you've spoken about. You know, I've had a couple of interviews where it's been about, 3 hours of like, who are you and where do you come from? And you're black or you're white and,
I kind of got into this as a venture in community building, So my requirement is that, after we go through the war, that I can break bread with you at my table with my kids and my wife, So for me, I try to give a lot of benefit of the doubt with the literature because sometimes the literature isn't sewn up as tight. So I'm hoping that the director is going to bring a lot of his or her own temperament, accent, perspective to the thing we're about to wrap our minds around. So,
what do you mean by community building?
My entryway into a lot of things is music, especially jazz. I always thought that filmmaking would be as collaborative as that, as free as that, as an experiment, And so I was looking for opportunity to sort of freely associate myself with other artists who are interested in a certain particular result, but really more interested in the process of coming up with the result. And so the community building thing comes out of the desire to collaborate, but at the end of the day, I know this may sound lame, but I want to be your friend. You know what I mean? Like I want to be your comrade. I want to be somebody that I carry on a relationship with. If I'm going to be that vulnerable and that open to you, it can't just be thank you. It was a great time working with you and go the opposite direction. Like so much of my meta now and I've left so much of my DNA out on the table that I want to make sure that the person that sweeps it up and sends me away is a comrade, is a friend. And so that's a really important gesture in my decision.
And what was that like with Denny on Arrival?
Well, with Denis, I was a big fan, lover of his films since Polytechnique. So I feel like I knew his etchings. I feel like I felt like I knew his writing on the wall really well in that sense. So I felt like I had a brother there, a kindred spirit. And so that part of it was seamless. I think the difficult part was just really us as two individuals that have our own sort of taste and our own sort of temperament around telling story, finding a way to like adapt ourselves in this heavily visual effects environment, which instinctually is not us at all, right? We've made very lo-fi, not under the radar, but like lo-fi films. And so the challenge was like, when I'm totally clueless and I don't know what the hell is going on, and I look at you and I say, I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Can I trust that? You'll say, no problem, man. Let's hand it off to somebody else. So that was a big, again, being vulnerable and being able to be honest and saying that, I don't know, I'm not sure if I trust this. I'm not sure if this is actually working. I'm not sure this is the way we should do it, or this is the way we would do it if it wasn't a heavily visual effects environment. I knew that, I felt like that Denis would be supportive in that sense. And he was, he knew that I had no visual effects. I never even shot a blue screen really before that. So to know that I would have a support in that way was really important for me.
One of the sailors pointed at the animals that hop around and put their babies in their pouch, and he asked what they were, and the Aborigines said, kangaroo. It wasn't until later that they learned that kangaroo means I don't understand.
I can sell that for now.
Yeah.
And remember what happened to the Aborigines? A more advanced race nearly wiped them out.
You're mentioning, I think something very important is that vulnerability, because after all, I think talking also about what cinematography is and the misconceptions of it, I think that we are telling emotional stories with the images, and it's not just making beautiful pictures. And I think that is a big misconception that, people think, it's good cinematography because it's beautiful, or, and it's not that. We're really trying to express the emotion of the story. And it's certainly, when I work with a director that is indeed vulnerable and it's a story that's important to him or her, that's what I want to participate in. And that's where I want to, create images that support that,
It's interesting also, as you say, Bradford, that you bring something of yourself. You come from somewhere, and even though we're trying to adapt to a script and a story and to a director's vision, there's a lot of amazing cinematographers in this world. But you also, it's not just about the beautiful images and who makes the most beautiful. It's about that connect, and you connect because you come from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you say the music, you know, I come from a farm where it's like all very practical, but it was also about the light. I mean, my dad was very, you know, the weather and the work and the stories that was told in this little village. Like so you always get something from home that I feel that you offer to a story, and that is what you use to adapt. You know, and that's what's exciting, is that you're 2 people, 3 people, 4 people in your group of filmmakers with this new story that you have to then use your feelings to portray.
Yeah, and I think that when you're shooting something too, is that lots of times it becomes an instinct more than anything. And it's very difficult when you're asked, why are you doing something? And, you know, I always love working with directors who sort of trust your instinct. You were experiencing the emotion in a scene because of where you are and where you put the camera and how you lit it. And I find it, you know, is really wonderful to be there at that moment when an actor, you know, creates a character and creates a performance that, you know, later on someone is going to get to see and experience the same kind of emotion that you're getting out of it. It's like, to me, you know, as a cinematographer, that's almost the most wonderful part of what it is that I do, more so than, you know, going out and shooting a beautiful sunrise or some incredible image. I mean, I oftentimes feel that some things that I shoot that are not very interesting, you know, are embody a certain kind of emotion that is really powerful, and that in the context of the film, when you know the script really well and you know the story and you're really in sync with the director, it's really exciting. And, you know, you can look at it as a daily on the day and think it's not very interesting, but you know when it's put into the context of the whole movie that it's going to have a certain emotional power that's really important to telling the story. And that's what I love about it.
But I mean, you're so close to the process. Do you ever watch the finished film and think, gee, I think the director picked the wrong take there. I would have gone for something else.
You know, it's interesting about the right take, because, you know, I think initially, you know, a director will pick a certain take, and then you get, you know, saying, oh, let's that and that take, and you get in the editing room, and as the scene evolves, you find that actually another take has a certain kind of emotion that you want more, and you didn't realize it at first. I mean, it's a very fluid process. You can always kind of tell when you go to a meeting that when the director is drawing you into their world, and they're, you know, it's like this spider web that's coming around you, and you know, then you start feeling like, okay, you know. And of course, you know, it has to be a story that you feel like you can relate to and bring something to.
That's part of the interview process too. Is in a way, it's a two-way interview, because you need to feel that you are the most appropriate, you're the appropriate person for that job. And in a way, you need to encourage a director to express all this. You know, what are their ideas, what are their feelings, what are they trying to pull out of a piece? And sometimes you're not the appropriate person for that picture. You know? So it's important to know that before you start shooting.
What were your thoughts going into Billy Lynn? Because not only was it a choice of a story to tell, it was a choice of a new way to tell the story.
It was very interesting because I had never worked in 3D. And I got the call from Eng's office to just do an interview. It was an interview more than to do a test, as opposed to an interview to do the film, because the film wasn't greenlit. And I had never shot 3D. I'd never actually been interested in 3D very much, because I'd been primarily disappointed in the way it's projected and displayed. I was always disappointed. You know, the projectors are usually too dim. The 3D glasses can desaturate and make the image darker. And I just felt it was a distraction more than increasing the value of the images. And so I went in for an interview, and I just wanted to be clear with Eng. I wanted him to understand that I had never shot 3D and basically expressed, you know, my ideas, and encouraged him to just tell me what, you know, his ideas were. I mean, he's a great filmmaker. I highly respected his work, and he's a wonderful man. He's a great director. But I was just curious what his intent was. So I really encouraged him to talk, and he had a lot of great ideas, and everything he said made a lot of sense to me. But at the end of it, I've heard indirectly that he felt like he was being interviewed as opposed to my interviewing him. And it was all because I was really just curious about his ideas, and they were fantastic. The ideas were, and I was completely drawn in, and I wound up doing the test and eventually the film, but it was great.
One of the reasons Ang was looking at the 120 frames per second was to improve on the 3D experience. So what were some of the things the two of you talked about in this process?
Well, he had Life of Pi was his first 3D picture. And he said that when he was doing it, he really enjoyed the process, but there were things about the 3D he knew could be improved. And in fact, the process itself actually created issues in strobing and smear and just, basically camera movement. And he had always been interested in the idea of high frame rate. And so he really wanted to just explore the idea, but it was primarily as an enhancement of the story, and essentially a way to become a little more intimate with the story, and especially the characters and the actors. And he really saw the value in the process for that. It was primarily a new way of telling stories, a new way to involve the audience. And he intentionally chose Billy Lynn as the project because he did not want to imply that it was basically a technology that would create more spectacle. It would be creating more intimacy.
And I know that close-ups was very important to him to connect the viewer with the
especially the actors' faces. He felt that's because of the clarity of the image. And I kind of like to use the word accessibility. Somehow everything becomes more accessible. And that comes out of the clarity of the high resolution and the high frame rate. So that's what we spoke a lot about.
Alpha team, when we move, shift fire! Lynn, Fu, when we get to that battle, throw everything you got on that gate. Don, you and Crack start working your way to the wounded. Mango! It's going down.
I would wonder, the technology is allowing more and more resolution, greater clarity, and yet some classic movies depend on shadow, they withhold information. Even Keller, with your movie, a lot's intentionally filmed in shadow. I wonder how you feel about this push towards more information in the image, or is a part of you like the old days when there were limitations on what could be shown?
Well, I think you can use it sparingly the way you light it and the way you photograph something. I've used lots of filtering on the things at times, and put things in the shadow. In the case of Warren's movie, it was just a reality that the character that Warren played, Howard Hughes, was always in the dark and was always kept in the dark. And, that creates its own kind of problems. But over the years, we've had film develop from 35 millimeter, and then, you do anamorphic, and then there's 65 millimeter film that becomes 70 millimeter projection. And, you see films like Lawrence of Arabia in 70 millimeter is really phenomenal. And, we've always been striving towards making things, much clearer and much sharper and bigger and more exciting, so you see more detail. But, I think you have to use it sparingly, and you have to think about how you want to use it and what do you do. There's always, a problem I have with digital is always, actually photographing faces, because you have to be really careful about, how sharp an image is. The thing that I always liked about film is that each frame is different. So the fact that one frame goes to another and the grain is in a slightly different place, actually is much more forgiving, for the human face. And, it actually gives you a certain quality that really, I find really fascinating. But I think, like everything is, like John, shooting his film at a high frame rate and projected at high frame rates in 3D, that's what artists do, is that they take a technology that somebody brings to them and they explore it.
But that's also why it's so important to have all the tools, like all kinds of cameras and all kinds of film stocks and filtering and lenses. It's always from the script where you, how the story is supposed to be told, where you want to go. And for us, I think cinematographers, we have the opportunity to use film stocks and different digital cameras and for I think for all of us, it is an obvious expression that becomes something specific when you make that decision. So if you shoot on a GoPro, something happens with this particular story, and that's where we always, I think, all of us sort of experiment with also more so perhaps than people understand sometimes, that we push process film stocks or pull process film stocks, and people don't really understand what happens, but we do by testing, or we know what happens. And I think what happens now is a little bit that, or has happened with the digital revolution, where everything is very fancy and fun with iPhones and all, and how the digital cameras, professional cameras develop, makes also a little bit a situation where the film suddenly disappeared because it was so convenient to shoot digital that we suddenly lose an expression form unless we hold on to it, you know. And then people could claim like you should film to make it look old or something, but where you could actually claim, from my point of view, that you actually could make it look really much more beautiful or whatever, or express it more this or that way. And I think sometimes digital looks much better depending on what story you want to tell, you know. But you want to have all the tools, really, right? I mean,
we have more now than we've ever had. I mean, that's the great thing.
Yeah. What you were saying is interesting for me, because I did 2 movies that are coming out at the same time, Passengers and Silence, and they couldn't be more different thematically, but also visually. And that's precisely what, for me, is exciting, the possibility of shooting one of those movies, Passengers, on digital, a 65mm digital camera, the Alexa 65, to get a really, very clear image. Not all the way to 120 frames per second, 3D, but this is a very pristine image. And for Silence, I shot most of it on film. And these were choices that we made, for several reasons. But certainly, for me, it's all about how it feels. How when I see an image, when I'm shooting tests, how does this image feel to me? Is this accurate to the movie, the story we're trying to tell? In Passengers, we were in a spaceship 600 years in the future, and it's a luxury ship. It's passengers that have paid to be in the ship. So I felt that the image should be, the oxygen should be clean. And for me, grain gives you a texture of, it gives you also a vibration that didn't feel accurate for Passengers. So that's why when I performed several tests and showed Morten Tildum, the director, we agreed that Passengers should be this format. Whereas on Silence, it was, a lot of it also was about hiding. And it's a very different thing. We needed clarity in Passengers, clarity of the air. And in Silence, it's priests that are in Japan. They're from Portugal. They go to Japan in an era of persecution. And they're, most of the time, they're hiding from if they're found, they'll probably be killed, So a lot of darkness, candlelight. So I used some digital for that. I used Alexa anamorphic lenses because of the low light capabilities. So I was able to shoot most of it on film because there are a lot of exteriors, and I felt that I used pushing the film for certain scenes where I wanted the texture to be a little rougher. And then for the night scenes with candles, I used digital. So it was kind of using the best of both worlds, and that's a very exciting time to be able to do that, or then suddenly do something at 120 frames per second. There are all the different options. Or maybe there's a movie that, yes, an iPhone will be the appropriate tool. So,
but I think that's an important point to make, that it's great to have all the tools. It's great to have film, it's great to have digital, it's great to have different size formats, everything, Each one of those ideas is, gives you something different, and how you use it is what you bring to the film that makes it exciting and interesting.
Shirley, did you shoot Fences on film?
35 mil.
Now, since it's an intimate drama, would it been easier to shoot on digital? Was film more of a challenge?
Easier. It was right to shoot on film. I think there was a whole... Denzel Washington was very, from the beginning, it was... there was a certain thing of staying very truthful to the play, and he did the play with Viola and knew the material very, very well. So there's a whole thing of bringing this play to the screen. Actually, Denzel from the beginning was like, this must be on film. And I think for him, it was so much about that texture and staying true to the feelings that he had about, with this story. With Girl on a Train, it was different. There was other reasons, because we were planning on being so close on Rachel, our lead actress, Emily Blunt, who's observing other people's lives from the train. It was so much about a POV story, because we have a girl right there who doesn't, she's observing people and thinking her thoughts that isn't, what really happened in reality. So there's a lot of things that we had to express just with the images. We had to be so close to her. And so there was other reasons why we felt film was right for
On Fences, what was it like working with Denzel as the director and also your lead actor?
It was really interesting. Denzel is a very passionate actor and director, and it was amazing because he knew the material so well. So for me, in the beginning, it was very much about the conversation we just had where, how do you connect as two people and how are we gonna, and for me to actually get into the material and try and be at the same level as he was understanding the story. So it was amazing. It is amazing when you're working with a director who suddenly, and also because I was operating, you're so close. You're like, you're really making a movie because it's like you cut and you're like, oh. So it's so spontaneous. So it was amazing. And it was amazing to, because also you have to, even though you're working, with Denzel, who's been 7 years with this film and has been, working hard in the screenplay that was written by August Wilson, in fact, as well as the stage play was. You also have to offer things, you can't just ride his journey on how the visual should be in the translation of a play to the screen, which we in fact were. It wasn't about making it a film now. It was about still staying true to the play. So it wasn't like an escape, and now we got to do everything in the world to make it, a film or, and that was also the reason for film. There's something about a theatrical play that just has that honesty.
Everything that boy do, he do for you.
It's not easy for me to admit that I've been standing in the same place for 18 years.
Well, I've been standing with you. I gave 18 years of my life to stand in the same spot as you.
I mean, I think the whole, and let me cut you off, but I think the whole universal conversation around digital versus film, this idea of pixels, information, how much is there, how much isn't there, it's like, it's a conversation going in circles, and it's become a kind of self-destructive conversation too, right? Because, something comes and something has to go, and it's so absolute. It's not the medium, it's not what we're using, it's what's anchored in it. Mm-hmm. Where's your culture in that film? Where's your grandmother's meta in that image? Have you shot your grandmother's hands? If you're gonna shoot your grandmother's hands, what's gonna be the appropriate format to shoot your grandmother's hands? I can't tell you that. The gatekeepers of film can't tell us what that is. Only you can tell yourself what that is. Finding your voice, your language. I think that's the real struggle. That's the real universal struggle for kids of color all over the world, from Asia to Latin America to Compton, California. Where do they find their story and the bias of these pieces of technology that have sort of somehow left us out of the conversation? And I think I'm not interested in having a conversation with them about the pixels or the resolution. I'm interested in having a conversation about why film could be a revolutionary venture and our evolution as human beings. I think we keep getting caught in the conversation between Arri and Sony, and all they're doing is just providing us with the stuff that y'all do whatever you want to do with it. You know what I mean? I can't tell you. I think the conversation of how do we anchor it? How do we anchor it in something that gives us feeling? How do you bring feeling to it? Which I feel like is the most important thing.
I mean, some people might say, it's great everyone has access to an iPhone. Anyone now has the option of making film, but they're not always going to bring art to it. And
But we didn't realize that police brutality was a real issue for us, right? We buried that reality for ourselves. So I'm all in support of people armed with tools that can reveal a certain reality and bring a certain reality of who we are to ourselves. So I'm not interested in it being only an expression of art. I'm interested in when you capture that and you shroud that moment and you contain that moment in real time, how can we use that to evolve? That's what film is here for, I think. It's here to entertain us. It's here to, but it's also here to feed us and nurture us and quench our thirst. And I think it's highly responsible for us as image makers that that use this as a profession to feed our children, to build our community, I think it's highly irresponsible for us to only say that only these things should be used for art. No, these things are tools of liberation. These are tools historically have been tools to liberate people. Battle of Chile, The Hour of the Furnace, Eyes on the Prize. These are all things where people weren't caught up in the resolution. They weren't caught up in the art of it. They were caught up in, this is what happened. This is what happened. Vilmos, this is how he got here, right? This is what's happening in real time right in front of me, and I'm not caught up in the art. I'm caught up in making sure that I show the world this is what my people are facing. And I think it's still relevant. That's still happening today. And I think I'm really excited and really proud of where the technology is going, because it's allowed us to show the world what's happening, who we are and where we're going and where we want to go. And I think in light of all of that, it's the imagination of the child that lives on a block where they see oppression and brutality every day. It's that child's imagination that is going to end up being that story of that imagining the future through that iPhone, that magical surrealism through the iPhone in light of the backdrop in which they live, that's going to free them. And I think that is why I'm pushing, that's why I want this image making thing to, I think we should really let it be, let it go. Let's not get caught in the technical thing. Let's figure out our real purpose with it.
I was wondering, when you look back at your movies, and John, you made some powerful films, are you ever surprised that a certain moment in the film, in a sense, goes viral even before we had that phrase go viral and becomes part of the culture? You shoot Braveheart. Do you know the rallying cry in that movie is going to be something that echoes 20 years later and people will be referring to it?
It did at the time, and I think it still will with some people.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, for me, even Amores Perros is something that constantly comes up. People, because people know that I shot it, so they will talk to me about scenes that, directors, that scenes that we shot not having a clue of really what we were doing. We were just, okay, so we have this car chase. What do we do? Okay, well, let's try this and that. And I've had, like even Ben Affleck, when we were doing Argo, he told me that for the town, he copied the chase scene of Amores Perros.
That's cool.
Ang Lee also told me that on the Hulk, one of the characters was based on Amores Perros and things like that. Really? We were just doing this little movie, in our Mexico City.
That's very inspiring.
But that's what it's about, is that it's the right tool for a story. And it doesn't mean that because you got a bigger or more fancy or newer camera and that then you can do it better. It doesn't mean that makes more of something, because the job still becomes about choosing the right tool and the right shovel for that hole, or the right, whatever you're doing, it's about the choice. And I think our jobs is so much about those choices. And for Fences, for example, that film was so much, and that was Denzel's vision with it, was that every setup was a choice.
I mean, you mentioned working with Denzel, who both starred and directed, and Caleb worked with the star and director and Warren Beatty. A few of you have worked with Mel Gibson or Ben Affleck. How does the dynamic change when the director has to put down his director hat for a moment and then move into character? Do you get to give him more space, or what's the experience like?
Warren has been a movie star for I don't know how many years, but he started early on being a producer and then a writer. I mean, he wrote Shampoo, and then, of course, he, directed Reds, which is a phenomenal, amazing movie. I mean, he's really quite remarkable. And, with Warren, I used to always joke with him that I would have to, if I would disagree with him about something, I said, well, let me talk to the writer, Warren, instead of the director, Warren, or instead of the producer, Warren, who wanted to do things certain ways. And I mean, I just found it really exciting to work with him. And honestly, when he would perform in front of the camera, he would never take the time to look at it played back. He would just do the scene and do what he thought he needed to do. We'd run it, okay, we'll do it again, and do it 3 or 4 times, and they go, that's it, and we move on. Because he was really respectful of all the other actors in the film, and it really helped them that he was not taking time with himself. And I thought that was really remarkable for somebody, who's been a movie star for so long, and, probably, was on films where he was just the movie star and was, pampered all the time, and people took the time. But he wasn't like that. He was, he knew this story so well, too, because he'd been working on it for so long. I mean, somebody was asking me, like, when did you first hear about this movie and when did you get involved? And I go, well, I think the last year that I was at USC Film School, I heard about this film because Warren's been working on it for so long, but it's you know, it was a great experience working with him.
What the hell is she doing here?
You said you wanted the girl with the two M's.
That's not her. That's Marlon Mabry. She's a Baptist nun, for Christ's sake.
It's the only one on the payroll with two M's.
Did it occur to you that maybe the one that I wanted with the two M's was not on the payroll?
Ah, you met Marilyn Monroe?
Who?
Marilyn Monroe?
Yes, Marilyn Monroe.
I really love the mystery of what we do, too, because, I mean, certainly in the days of film, when you would shoot film, you wouldn't see dailies till the next day or sometimes longer. And I really, you know, I don't think I ever shot film where I didn't go to bed at night and wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning in a sweat that I thought I had underexposed too much, or I had lit something too bright or done something wrong. And it was terrifying, but I missed that about shooting something on digital, because the other aspect of it is that there was a certain kind of, you know, community that would come around to watch dailies the next day. And you would sit in a screening room or in a trailer or wherever you happened to be, and you would bond with everybody in that room, the assistants, the operators, and the director. And, you know, you also had a chance to be separated from it. And there's something that's sort of magical about separating yourself from what you shoot, because when you shoot it, you have a certain emotion, you know, on the set of being like under the pressure and, you know, got a light, the sun's going down and all this stuff, and you lose track of it. And it's, you know, it's like some of you were talking about, where you just go and you do it and you have to get it done and you're not sure what you have. And then you go the next day and you go, oh my God, that's wonderful and amazing. And it, you know, you sort of feel like it's not part of you, because it feels like it comes from somewhere else. You know, it comes from some kind of inspiration that you didn't even know you had or whatever. And, you know, that's the one thing that I miss about, you know, when you shoot something digitally, because everybody thinks, oh, that's the way it's going to be. And then everybody goes off on their own and watches it on some silly little, you know, iPad or something like that. But, you know, even on Warren's film, because we were filming at the studio that was right by where Technicolor was, we would leave the set and go, and maybe 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was, and I'd go there with my crew and we'd watch it. And I would have a whole different understanding of what I had filmed than when we were there, because I was relieved of that emotion of being on the set. I was relieved of that, you know, experience of being on the set and the pressure and, you know, dealing with, you know, where the light's going to go and like, oh, I wish we had moved the camera here, and you know, and then that all disappears, and you know, you're seeing an image on the screen that gets to you, and it's great.
I think it's important to be in a room where people tell you that you're not crazy, right? I think that's like, ultimately at the end of the day, like, it's, you know, the filmmaking process, even when you're amongst, you know, a stage full of hundreds of people doing what they do, it can get lonely sometimes, especially when you're pushing it, when you're pushing it in a way that's like, it's uncomfortable. You know, the Daily's colorist is going to come back and say, the negative's thin, you know what I mean? And you know, you oftentimes, because sometimes it takes people to get up to speed, it takes folks to sort of wrap their mind around what this thing is that you're doing. It's beautiful to have community around you, because, as I was trying to say before, community really holds you up. So even when it's massively underexposed, you know you had intention, and generally the crew that's around you.
And sometimes it becomes really magical.
I know, and
you go
exactly,
like just see those eyes.
Exactly.
And it wasn't safe.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's like, man, that little bit of not being in control, that little bit of kind of feeling something and you do something, and then sometimes there's a mistake. But that mistake adds something that you know, and sometimes not being so in control by having, you know, the Monitor Village and all the buttons and everything that you can go and check and do and try out. And you go like, sometimes I don't want to try out. Actually, right now, I just want to be right here with this scene and the idea. And sometimes the idea that has to go through this little light meter and into that lens. And we spoke about it in prep. We spoke about it, and now we're here too. So sometimes I feel that it becomes a one-directional workflow, because we all look. You sit by the camera and you're looking that way. You don't run off and into. And I know, like, of course, there's other movies where where it's really important you can go and see this. And that's the choice. It's like, well, we got to be able to go in and see that we got this. But I'm talking about Fences now. That magical feel was so much in the performance. It was so much about supporting the words and just being there, not doing all this, just being. And that, I think, film supported, not just because of the texture and everything that we were talking about, that it's, how much information, but also about how do you work with this media. We stay there and we look at it, and we were all looking that way. And I think for this, it was important. And for certain scenes, we stepped back and we placed the camera in a wide shot where the audience was at the play, and we go like, let's not escape the play. Let's not put everything into making it cinema. Let's just once in a while go back and sit and look at that angle. And we were all looking at it, and you kind of went into the play. And I think, and then you leave it, and then it comes on, there's something magical about filming the idea.
Now, once you go into post-production and the digital color timing process, you can relight a scene. I mean, the tools allow you to do anything. Do all of you go to the DI? Do you feel like you're in control of your film from start to finish?
Well, that's a really important part of the process.
Yeah.
I mean, especially today. I mean, in the old days when you had film, you basically had 3 printer lights and that was it. And you would always light something as perfectly as you had time for or possibly do it. And, it would be really simple. But now, I mean, when you go into the digital medium, you can...
It's not so simple.
Well, no, but
Oh, it is.
I mean...
I would say you want to capture it in camera, and I'm very nervous about the DI because I don't want it to look anything different from what I intend. And that's my biggest fear with the DI is actually that something will happen there that will create, something that I wasn't intending. And to me, the DI is 1/3 of sort of the possibilities of what you can achieve with the look of the film. And I think whatever you do on set is so important, and it's just so little actually that you should do in the DI, in my opinion, because the more you do there, the more you screw up the image for how it was captured, I think.
And how did it work with La La Land? Because you have whole scenes that are shot at twilight. Obviously, twilight lasts 10 minutes, but...
Well, I absolutely think that the DI is obviously an amazing tool versus printing the film. The DI you have the ability to fix things, obviously, that you have screwed up. So that's good. You could light up faces or you could tweak things. But I think the general look of the film, in my opinion, is always created with your choices of lenses and or film stocks. And in La La Land, it was very important for us to have a lot of color. And to me, adding color in the DI is not always looking very good because you have a very limited amount of color to work with if you don't have it already in the beginning. So you can't just take us around the table here and make us look colorful. It's going to look, everyone's going to think it looks forced and weird. But if you capture it with color, like if you capture it with a film stock and you push process us around here, perhaps actually our colors comes out more and we shine a little more and we have a little more lip color. Depending on film stock as well. So I agree. I mean, I totally agree with you that if you want to be emotional and poetic, a lot of times it really helps to be able to work with these tools and in different ways. And in La La Land, we worked in 255 CinemaScope. We had Panavision open up the ground glass for us, so we could shoot sort of Super 35 full, and then we cut it 255. And the 255 format was for nostalgic reasons to sort of give a nod to films like Star is Born from the 50s, but also in the film we have sequences in 16 anamorphic because that is sort of more of a sort of home video footage style, or they're watching a 16mm projection on a screen, and those two different formats are so completely different, and we could have chosen to shoot something digital probably as well if we wanted to, achieve something specific with that. But I think for us it was very important with color, and what I found was that the film stock really gave us a lot of color. So when we came to the DI, actually in the dailies already, I really want to try to stay with print lights as much as possible, adjust what's photochemically sort of correct with the film stock. And so, yeah, so we worked that way.
Who knows? Is this the start of something wonderful and new? Or one more dream that I cannot make true?
There's so much you can do in production and then pre-production. There's the color and the DI, but there's also things like what talking about when Linus is talking about that you know, if you want to work with color, there's a certain idea in creating the colors that you want in the lens, and also you decide on an idea. You don't leave everything, and then we can find the cool look later. Obviously, as a cinematographer, you have all these visions for the script, so it's something that you want to achieve. But also other things like not just the color, but things that you can do in the post, like you can skip frames, or there's so much you can do that is like storytelling and creating it on set, and then you adjust or you increase or you know, that's what it should be about post-production. I'm not talking about, you know, obviously if you shoot green screen is a different thing, but I just wanted to add that on Girl on a Train, we made those decisions because we're working with our lead actress, Rachel. She's drunk a lot of the time. And we wanted to add something in the visuals, so it wasn't all kind of just relying on Emily Blunt going like, I'm drunk. But just a feel of being drunk without overdoing it, because drunk is such a fine balance of, it's got to be truthful. So we had a lot of the scenes, let's skip some frames, let's shoot 6 or 8 frames per second, and we step print it. And that's a decision because you put that on the negative, so you don't have all the frames, but you decide we're going to shoot 8 frames per second, and we duplicate those frames, and it gives like a more staggering kind of feel, which adds to a feel. And to decide that later on becomes too much of a...
You always want to have the decision made from the beginning, even if it's a visual effect, post-production sort of creative thing, then you want to know in the beginning when you shoot it, obviously.
Yeah, I think digital intermediate is like a two-edged sword, because I'm a big fan of it, even from when it was just starting. Movie Frida, I was one of the first digital intermediates, and I love the possibility of continuing the process, the creative process, into post-production and being able to, you know, tweak the image to a certain extent. I agree with Linus that it's. I try to put it all on camera because, contrary to the belief, you can't relight a movie, even in the DI. No matter what you do, the position of the light is the position of the light and the character of the scene. Certainly, you can do a lot. You can change the character of the scene, but not certainly the position of the light. But I'm also I really actually also manage the movies I make because of if I have to do a DI or not. Right now, I'm in that process for both Passengers and Silence, and I've turned down work to be able to do this because it's such an integral part of the whole process. It's like missing pre-production and just going straight into shooting a movie. It's the same missing post-production. It's sort of the same thing or worse.
It's creative.
It's crucial, and I for one really enjoy the process.
Yeah, I do too, and it's really exciting. But you know, something we haven't talked about, and because you were talking about color and you bring color. You know, production designers and costume designers are so important to what we do because it's so important to have a really good relationship with them and to be involved in the film early enough that you can get involved and do tests. I mean, I've had experiences in the past where a costume designer will come up with a certain color and everything, and then, you know, you shoot tests and they're like surprised that it doesn't come out the way they want it to look because... No matter what you're shooting, no matter what film stock or what digital camera, it's not going to come out exactly the way you see it. And, you know, you ultimately, you know, what drives you is more skin tone is more important than the color of someone's jacket being the perfect celadon green or something like that. Yeah, I think it's sort of wonderful too, because I mean, if you think about it, I mean, that's another place where you understand the emotion and the the characters by, what someone chooses to wear is really, very, integral to who they are as a person, and, where they live and, what the setting is. And, and then you were talking about, doing, fences and dropping back to where an audience sees. I mean, that's another thing that's really important, is understanding when you need to take a breather and step back and watch something, and what that emotion does for you, and how the actor acts when you're way back as opposed to when you're in a really close-up. I did a film years ago where we had shot a sort of medium close-up of the actor, and then later in dailies decided that it wasn't quite close enough to read the emotion, and we actually went in this much closer because you couldn't quite read it. And it's, these things are really important. It's what, it's important for what we do in terms of paying attention to what's going on within that frame to get across the emotions that are part of the scene that you do.
And we also become the cinematography. You're also the link between the director and production designers, and they discuss the color. We were working with some very, very blue color, and that became the world. And Denzel was like, and that was obviously David Grutman, the production designer, had different layers of this, and then we become the link, because it's got to go through that lens and ideas that you were bringing. But then the DI, you can go in there and it changes. It's a fine.
Yeah. But in the end, I think it's fascinating that everything that everyone does in a film set has to go through that lens and into that celluloid or sensor. And so it's a big responsibility, and to be able to communicate with everybody.
Absolutely.
And for example, for me, it was fascinating to watch Scorsese. We've worked in several projects together already, and he has a very particular style, which I think for silence, he was aware that it wasn't a movie to shoot like Wolf of Wall Street or so many movies he's done with incredible camera movement. In this film, there are some flourishes because, again, the characters go into some deep places where, we wanted to express that weirdness of their emotion. But a lot of it is very simple, very still, very static. Just letting the performance happen, or they're witnessing things that are happening, and it's their point of view of what's happening from a distance. So these decisions are really crucial, to put you in the perspective of the characters as an audience. When you go to the cinema, you want to feel what that person is feeling and put yourself in their position. So I think it's really exciting to me to participate with a director in making those decisions and what will actually work to make you feel what that person's feeling.
Ferreira is lost to us. He denounced God in public and surrendered the faith.
That's not possible. Father Ferreira risked his life to spread our faith all over Japan.
It seems to me that our mission here is more urgent than ever. We must go find Father Ferreira.
This is in your hearts, then, both of you.
Yes.
Then I must trust God has put it down.
We're about to come to the end of our time together, but a couple of quick things that I'd just like to go around the table with all of you. When you're not working, do you carry a camera with you? Or if you see something, do you pull out an iPhone? What do you do for taking quick shots?
I use my iPhone. I have a few cameras, but they all seem too cumbersome nowadays to get the stuff I want to get. I'm shooting my kids a lot, so that for me is the quickest way to get close to them. It's private too. It's just on my phone. So if I'm in a pinch, I'm in production and pre-production, I just look at my,
Yeah, I still use still cameras, but I probably don't carry it around as much as I used to, and I whip out the iPhone and use it, and I actually shoot more photographs because it's there, and because you don't want to carry a camera around all the time. So I think it's great. It's really useful.
Charlotte,
I don't. I'm a paper person. I find things and I put in my thing and something online. Find references elsewhere.
Well, on the last film I did with Florian Henkel von Donnersmarck, we had to take he wanted me to take stills that were then used as paintings in the movie, and I started using my Leica camera again with film, and I hadn't used it in years, and I've been carrying it around with me and taking black and white pictures, and there are places you can still get it processed, and it's really exciting because it has that mystery, It's really wonderful.
I usually use my professional cameras only for work, for scouting and for, when we're shooting sometimes. But actually in life, I do use my phone to take photos. And I've become kind of a fan of Instagram, because it's a hobby. It's, I color time them. I get apps that, I color time a photo and I'll create an image and so it's a little hobby that I now take more photos like that than before because I have the camera right with me, and also capture moments that I wouldn't have with a different camera because it's boom, you got it. Yeah. Rather than, oh wait, no, that exposure and the focus and gone, right? So it is it's a pretty good tool.
Yeah, I'm the same. I like the instance of being able to shoot with the iPhone, like with the kids or anything privately like that. But then I shoot quite a lot of stills on, like when I work on other cameras. Also, medium format camera.
Okay.
I like.
And last question, would you share a favorite shot or scene from a movie that you did not shoot?
It's the one hella long, super arduous push into Nicole Kidman on Birth while she's sitting at the opera. That for me is like, Harris Savides, and like, the only reason why I even want to do this was because of that potential, the textual reality, that persistence, the Glazer's, he's not cutting out. I think that's for me is like one of the most important shots in the sort of lexicon of things that I use as like a referential landscape. That's, not because it's Nicole Kidman, but more of the effort for the, that's a pure, I think the best example I have, I think, is of a director, a cinematographer in total agreement on what the intent of that shot is supposed to be.
Any other favorite shot?
I would have to say maybe it's I Am Cuba. It's a famous moment, famous shot where the camera goes into the
whole
pool.
movie.
The whole movie is full of Raging Bull, the opening shot, the title sequence, slow motion.
I have one little shot in a Persona Ingmar Bergman film where one actress comes out and there's a little piece of glass and it's just a simple close-up of that glass and the camera, and she doesn't step on it. But the person who placed the glass is sitting right there and it's just a tilt up. And that whole thing of storytelling of, it's just a piece of glass, but it's like the jealousy and all the things that you can read into such a little storytelling movement of a piece of glass on the ground and a foot just not hitting it or hitting it.
Well, I don't know if it's a shot, but it's kind of a sequence. But in 2001, when the apes are fighting and these other apes are coming in and they have these bones and one of them throws it up in the air and you cut to the spaceship that match cuts in outer space and you're transformed through, an infinite amount of time instantly. And it just kind of takes your breath away. And, your mind goes crazy trying to figure out the intervening years that take you to this, this moment in outer space. And you realize now that 2001 was a long time ago.
And it was the future.
I have to say one friend, not because Rodrigo's here, because he's my buddy, but in Beautiful, there's a scene where Javier goes to the film room for the kids and he's sitting on one end. I think I've talked to you about this before. He's sitting on one end of the room and the casket's in the foreground. And it's like, this man has inspired me in so many ways, just in terms of being brave and, hitting it hard when it's time to hit it hard, but also being really delicate and sensitive when it's time for that as well. But it just felt like purpose, resonance, intention, story, it's all in that frame. And that for me is a real powerful moment.
John, does something come to mind?
I think I've never gotten over the opening sequence of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which was, especially for the time, was absolutely stunning. And probably inspired me, probably the thing that inspired me most to actually pursue cinematography. And I did a job this year where I traveled internationally quite a bit, and we were always on 8-10-hour flights. And it seemed like every flight I was on, Butch Cassidy was on the screen, So I would watch it and kind of reminded myself again and reappreciated that scene. It's just, especially for the time, it's just so dynamic and, you know, really tight close-ups and mysterious and kind of cool. And it was 1968, you know? Mm.
And Linus?
Oh, I was thinking actually about your film, The Right Stuff, when they're walking towards you.
I remember that shot.
Yeah, that shot is very epic.
How many frames per second was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, it wasn't 48, but it was like around 40 frames.
Yeah.
Or something.
But again, all these shots that we talk about really makes a difference for the audience. And I think what cinema is about creating magic for the audience and tell the story in whatever way is best. And all these different technicalities are just a result of the intention of the storytelling and to create magic, you know.
Well, actually, Caleb probably deserves royalties for the number of other films that have copied that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like Rodrigo for Maurice Perno's car chase. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being with us today. Your new films all have great images of their own, and we appreciate hearing what you put into them. So thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
What's going on? I'm Alicia Keys. I'm Taraji P. Henson.
John Favreau. Jeff Bridges here.
Matt Damon.
Naomi Harris.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for watching.
For more videos, be sure to subscribe.
I guess subscribe online for more videos if you want more of that stuff.
I don't work for The Hollywood Reporter. They paid me to say that, though.